Yume Nikki is one of my favorite games of all time. It's a game I've always had some sort of interest in, but ever since I finally played it for the first time last year, it's become a major part of my life. Without Yume Nikki, I probably wouldn't make these long game analyses, as it was the first game I covered in this format. I'll admit my Yume Nikki video isn't great, but I still appreciate it for what it is. Putting aside how it's influenced my channel, there's so many games that I would have likely never tried playing if not for Yume Nikki. Yume Tuki, Flow, Hypnagogia, Aoni, Ib, and Hylix I either would have never been aware of, or would have never played, if not for Yume Nikki. However, there's one game that I've left out of that list. One game that not only has taken direct inspiration from Yume Nikki, but is supposed to be a remake of Yume Nikki. Yume Nikki Dream Diary. Yume Nikki Dream Diary is frustrating. It's a 3D remake of Yume Nikki, made under the direct supervision of Kikiyama, the original game's creator, but it lacks any of the soul that made the original so great. For those of you unfamiliar with Yume Nikki, it's an RPG Maker game made in 2004, though it's more of a walking sim than anything. Yume Nikki is truly one of the most unique games I've ever played, as aside from the games it's directly influenced, and also LSD Dream Emulator, there's nothing else really like it. You do have a goal in the game, that being to collect all of the effects and see the ending, but the real appeal of Yume Nikki is just seeing what strange and often creepy things are hiding within the dream world. Yume Nikki is less of a game, and more of a piece of art. I know that sounds pretentious as hell, but really, it is. I saw a YouTube comment one time that described the game really well. If I can find it, I'll put it on screen, but it went something like, Yume Nikki is less of a game, and more of an interactive painting, and I think that is a perfect description. So, why is Dream Diary so frustrating? Well, it takes the original concept of Yume Nikki and changes it to be more of an adventure game. On paper, this is fine. Dream Diary is still about exploration, though it has much more of a focus on platforming and puzzle solving. I have no issue with this approach, but I do have issue with the execution. One of Yume Nikki's best aspects is how mysterious it is. The game tells you next to nothing about its plots, its world, or its main character, Marotsuki. It's all up to the player to look at the game and interpret what they think the game is about, which makes the experience unique for every single person that plays it. Dream Diary removes all of the mystery. Now, that isn't to say Dream Diary doesn't try to be mysterious. It definitely does. It just doesn't do a good job. I'll go over this more when we get into the game proper, but Dream Diary constantly references parts of the original Yume Nikki, but it over-explains them or just uses them poorly. Now, what exactly do I mean by over-explains? Well, to answer that, let's take a look at Uboa. In the original game, Uboa is a mysterious figure that you can only find via a secret Easter egg. He's a bit creepy, but he's also a complete mystery. Who or what he is never explained. And given that he's a completely optional part of the game, there's no reason to explain him. He's just a weird Easter egg. And that's it. Now, how does Dream Diary handle him? He's a glorified jump scare. This is the issue I have with Dream Diary. As you'll see throughout this video, I don't think it's necessarily a bad game, but it is a terrible remake. I'd personally rank it among the worst remakes I've ever seen, purely based on how it fundamentally misunderstands the point of Yume Nikki. Going back to the Uboa example, Uboa was turned from a mysterious Easter egg into a jump scare. And let me just say now, this isn't the only time Dream Diary does this. But before we get into that, if you end up enjoying this video, please do leave a like and subscribe, as it really helps me out. Also, really quick before we get into the game, I'm going to skip over a good amount of this game's content as I don't want this video to just turn into a walkthrough. I'm still going to go over most of what this game has to offer, but I'm only going to be bringing up stuff that I think is relevant to my main point of this game is a bad remake. Speaking of getting started, let's boot up Yume Nikki Dream Diary and see just why exactly it succeeds as a game, but fails as a remake. Okay, so first things first, what the hell is a Yume Nikki? If you clicked on this video without knowing that...
What's wrong with you?
I'm just kidding. I'll go ahead and try to keep this short, but for those of you unfamiliar, Yume Nikki is an RPG Maker game made in 2004 by Kikiyama, blah blah blah. We went over all that already. All you need to know is that you play as this girl named Marotsuki, and that she's a hikikomori, which is a Japanese term for a young person with an isolated lifestyle, and her only real escape is her lucid dream world, which the game takes place in. I've already mentioned the lack of any real plots, but there's plenty of symbolism in the game, which suggests a story of mental illness and trauma, culminating in the death of Marotsuki, which may be literal or metaphorical, depending on your view. Anyway, with that bit of context out of the way, we can actually get into Dream Diary. From now on, I'm going to be referring to Yume Nikki Dream Diary as just Dream Diary, so I can keep things simple. Also, before you get in the comments and say, actually Yume Nikki already means Dream Diary, I know. I don't know why the developers decided to call this game Dream Diary, but I think it's kind of silly. The game starts with the scene of Marotsuki walking from a convenience store to her apartment. This is the game's tutorial, and while it's pretty uninteresting, I do still have something to say about it. This game's ugly as hell. Look, there's no getting around it. Dream Diary is just not a good looking game. I get it, it's an indie game made by a small group of people who likely haven't had much experience with 3D, but it still looks bad. I don't mind that the game is in 3D. In fact, I think the concept of turning Yume Nikki into a fully explorable 3D environment is great. But therein lies my next issue. This is not a fully explorable 3D environment. Some of the areas are in full 3D, but many, like the tutorial, are just side-scrollers. We'll get more into this later though, so for now, let's focus back onto the tutorial. It's not very eventful, with the only thing that's really noteworthy being this strange blood stain that appears on the ground at the end, which is just something from the original game, and honestly, I don't even know why it's here. The only thing I can think of is that Dream Diary is supposed to be both a remake and a pseudo-sequel to Yume Nikki, but like, there's nothing else in the game that suggests this. Anyway, after finding the bloodstain, Marotsuki wakes up, and we can explore her apartment. It's pretty similar to the original game, allowing us to play a minigame on her Famicom, head out to the balcony, and sleep in the bed. They did also add a bathroom for some reason, but this room is literally never used for anything in the game. Sleeping in the bed, we're brought to the dream world. There's an otherworldly pink glow present throughout this entire area, which I actually like a lot. While I do think the graphics in Dream Diary aren't great, it still does a fantastic job with its atmosphere. That's in no small part due to the soundtrack, which is comprised of both remakes of tracks from the original game and new compositions. The song present here in the balcony is new, and I think it's a very fitting song for both this game and the original Yume Nikki. Anyway, going up to Marotsuki's door allows us to access the Nexus. There's 7 more doors here, though only 6 are accessible at the moment. Now, Technically, you can go through these doors in any order, just like in the original game. However, given that Dream Diary has much more of a linear progression than Yume Nikki, I think it makes far more sense for me to just go through these doors in the order that I went through them, which just so happens to be the order with minimal backtracking. I've gone on long enough about how this game works and how it starts. You're here for why it fails as a remake, so how about we start with the first door, which happens to contain one of the best examples of why Dream Diary fundamentally misunderstands its source material. The first door leads into a dark alleyway area, resembling a Shotengai, which are Japanese shopping streets. This is another side-scrolling area, and given that the game very clearly wanted me to go right, I decided to go left. I was actually rewarded by doing this, as I happened to find a red jellyfish, which is a carryover from the original game. This jellyfish is present in the dense woods, as well as the ending, and is theorized to possibly represent some sort of spirit of death, given the two places it appears. Interacting with it causes a chime noise to play as it disappears, which made me think it's some kind of collectible. We'll see what the jellyfish is for much later though, so let's focus on the actual area. The Shotengai starts off pretty uneventful, but honestly, I like it. This is a fully original setting not present in the original game, and honestly, it feels more like something out of Yume Nikki than Yume Nikki. Regardless, the music here creates such a chill vibe that I really did appreciate as I was walking through. While I would prefer if this was an area from the original game, I do think the Shotengai is a good inclusion overall. This continues when we get to the next screen, where a short cutscene plays. There's now a bunch of eyeballs and disembodied hands here, which makes me wonder, is this supposed to be an analog to the eyeball world in the original game? There's another quote-unquote new area we'll see later, which is clearly a reinterpretation of a location from the original. So is this supposed to be the eyeball world? I don't know. What I do know is that this is where things start getting more interesting, at least gameplay-wise. Unlike Yume Nikki, Dream Diary is more of an adventure game instead of just a walking sim, so pretty much every area has something for you to actively do. Here, it's just avoiding the eyeballs. If you touch them for too long, Manotsuki will die and get teleported back to the start of the room, so it's best to keep moving. This section is still super easy though, which brings me to the next area. This introduces the Alley Demon, another returning NPC, though this time in a much more hostile role. In the original, this was just a background NPC present in the sewer area, but now, it's an active threat. Much like the eyeballs, they're an easy obstacle, though you do still have to avoid the eyeballs. The eyeballs can cause Manotsuki to trip, delaying her from moving between alley demons, which could cause a reset. Again though, this section really isn't hard. The next room adds some giant hands which can crush Manotsuki, requiring us to bait the eyeballs into the hands so we can safely move past. There's still plenty of alley demons to avoid as well, but it's still overall easy. The next room causes another cutscene to play, as a shadowy figure appears and starts slowly chasing Manotsuki. This is an original character not present in Yume Nikki, and honestly I'm not sure why it's here. It sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of the NPCs in this game, and it's barely even a threat. If you keep moving, avoiding the alley demons and eyeballs, the Shadow Man will never even get close to you. I really can't stress enough how out of place the Shadow Man feels. It seriously feels like an enemy taken out of a different game, and not in a good way. This is especially an issue later when it reappears, but we'll go over that later. After the Shadow Man, Manotsuki has to avoid a big wave of eyeballs as the sewer drawings from the original game appear, but eventually we'll reach a door. This brings Monotsuki to a slaughterhouse, which is completely silent aside from some ambience. This is a pretty creepy area, though one again not present in the original game. In this room, we can find the knife effect, which works just like how it did in the original. Unlike in the original, however, there's no point. You don't get yen for killing NPCs, and there's only one spot the knife is needed to progress, which is coming up in just a minute. After getting the knife, we arrive in a room with a Henkei, another returning NPC from the original. This guy will eat Monotsuki if she gets too close, so we need to find a way past. Thankfully, there's a ladder nearby, which will take us up to a machine hooked up to 2 levers. We need to get the right number to progress, but how do we find the right number? It's literally just written on the wall in the knife room. I didn't notice this on my playthrough. After a bunch of trial and error, I gave up and just looked up the solution. It wasn't until after I returned to this area looking for secrets that I found the number on the wall. Anyway, entering the correct number causes the conveyor belt below us to activate, allowing Monotsuki to pass by the Henkei unharmed. This brings us to the dense woods, a returning area from the original game. Just keep walking right, and eventually we find Onsen-san? This is another returning NPC, though not one from this area of the game. Onsen-san, as the name implies, is originally from the hidden onsen in the wilderness, not the dense woods. Now, this is technically another puzzle. You need to figure out how to get past Onsen-san, as he blocks the road, but I accidentally solved it immediately. See, in the original game, Onsen-san is unable to be killed. Hitting him with the knife changes his color, so I immediately hit him with the knife, just to see if it would do the same thing here. Instead, this happens.
What the fuck?
So what the hell was that even about? The green man that shows up is Shitai-san, another returning character. Though Dream Diary is seemingly implying that Monotsuki is the one that killed him, in the original game, this is just a random corpse you find in the dense woods. Shitai-san is often interpreted as representing some kind of car accident that happened in Monotsuki's life, one that likely ended with the death of her parents. Now, this ending here might be representing the same thing, as this might represent some form of survivor's guilt. But I don't know, man. The initial shock of seeing something from the original game be interpreted so poorly just left me with a sour taste in my mouth. I will say, though, this is the worst it gets. Nothing else in Dream Diary is nearly this stupid, though there are a couple parts that I think are worse, either in gameplay or in how exactly the character was used. With that though, we're done with the first door. There's 5 left to go, and the next 2 kind of tie into each other, so I'm going to go over them together. Heading through the door to the right of the Shotengai takes us to the wilderness. This is a returning area from the original game, and it's one of my favorites in Yume Nikki. With that in mind, I was a bit cautious to see how Dream Diary would handle an area that I hold in such high regard, but thankfully they handled it just fine. It's definitely worse than the original version, given that it's so much smaller and has a lot less content, but I enjoyed my time here nonetheless. The main focus of the wilderness is unlocking the entrance to the Sky Garden, which we do by finding 4 stone slabs scattered around the area. The first one can be found in the starting room by interacting with this sad cube. Nearby there's a train car, which takes us to the barrack settlement from the original game. However, unlike in the original game, the Perori NPCs aren't present. That's because of the mouth monster roaming around, who will kill Madatsuki if she gets too close. It's clear that we need to find a way to get rid of the monster, but how do we do that? By heading to the middle of the barracks settlements, we can find a cage which we can interact with. But what are we supposed to use here? Would you believe me if I said it was a random eyeball? Now, I will say, I figured this puzzle out by complete accident. It's not a hard puzzle at all. Hell, I don't think it's really a badly designed puzzle. But how the hell are you supposed to figure out that you can kill this random bit of grass in the first wilderness area? Sure, you can kill it in the original game too, but even after doing this, I missed picking up the eyeball. I straight up didn't see the prompt for picking up the eyeball, which is completely my fault. But I mean, it could have been a little more obvious, I guess? I still won't fault the game too much here, as this was mostly a skill issue on my part. If it wasn't clear by now, you're supposed to trap the mouth monster in the cage to progress in the wilderness. But we need more than just this eyeball, so we need to head to the docks. The docks are a pretty linear side-scrolling area, where we need to find some coins in order to buy an item at the vending machine. The coins are scattered around the docks, though there's also some Tori Ningen in the way. Tori Ningen function similarly to how they do in the original game, where they chase after Madatsuki as one of the only actively hostile NPCs, though instead of teleporting her to a secluded area, they just straight up eat her. The Tori Ningen have to be removed in order to progress, which is done by luring the first one to an area where we can more easily avoid it, and the other two we just drop it to the water. At the end of the docks, we can see this strange elongated creature who is blocking the path. To his left, there's a symbol of some sorts, alongside a plank we can interact with. Interacting with the plank has Madatsuki rip it off, allowing us to access what was behind it, the Hamza effect. The Hamza is a reference to the Madama Ude effect in the original game, though its function is completely different. Instead of teleporting Madatsuki back to the Nexus, it instead reveals hidden items and paths. At this point in the docks, I had 9 of the 10 coins needed, though I couldn't find the last one. So I decided to do the last thing I could do here, and enter the train car. This takes us back to the wilderness, which brings us back to the barrack settlements. With the red eye and the plank, we can now trap the mouth monster, which is a pain in the ass to do. Madatsuki can initially outrun the monster, though it quickly speeds up, becoming way faster than her. What you're supposed to do here is jump on the boxes and wait until it stops attacking, then lure it to the next box. But this is far easier said than done. The boxes are just far enough apart that the mouth monster will sometimes catch Madatsuki, and sometimes Madatsuki won't even be able to climb up fast enough. After a couple minutes of trying, I was eventually able to trap the mouth monster, meaning the Perori finally come out, allowing us to progress in the wilderness. The last 3 of the stone slabs are hidden in the village, with one being inside a house, and the other 2 requiring us to give items to Perori within the village. One of the Perori wants a kalimba, and the other wants a kite. Thankfully, we can get both of these in the next area, though we need another effect first. Heading over to the mall, we can find this area on the first floor. This is directly ripped from Yume Nikki, and interacting with this NPC, known as Oh Man, gives us the flute effect. Quick side note, I really hate Oh Man's design in this game. In the original, he was just a weird little purple creature, but in Dream Diary, he's like a human? I don't know, I don't like it. We'll come back to the mall later, so for now, let's return to the wilderness. Heading back onto the train from the Perori village, we can see a small black creature.
Disgusting black creatures.
Interacting with it causes it to play a small tune, and recreating it with the flutes gives us the kalimba. Attempting to head back to the barrack settlement will instead take us to the mural world, yet another returning area. Despite being a returning area, however, It's very different from its original incarnation. It's much smaller, and is seemingly a combination of the mirror worlds and forest worlds, with the background from the graffiti world also being used for some reason. Instead of any of the NPCs originally present in the mirror worlds, there's this NPC, known as Rappy. According to the developers of Dream Diary, this was an NPC originally planned to be in Yume Nikki. It's a misshapen creature that resembles some of the white desert NPCs from the original game, though it's blue instead of white. Heading back on the train takes us back to the docks, where we can now finish up here. As a reminder, at this point I had 9 of the coins, with only 1 more needed. The only issue now was that the Tori Ningen respawned, so now I had to remove them again. Kind of annoying, but it's not a huge deal. Anyway, removing the first Tori Ningen is actually required for getting the last coin that I missed, as it was hidden by the Tori Ningen. Honestly, I'm pretty sure I only missed this because I thought I already got it. With 100 yen in hand, we can now buy an item from the vending machine. Taking this back to the fisherman at the start allows him to catch a sad fish, which we can bring to the long, hungry man at the end of the docks. This allows us to pass into the next area, where we have to avoid the light of a lighthouse as it passes by. And this segment can be frustrating due to the strict timing and janky hitbox of the lighthouse, but with some patience it's pretty doable. I'm going to complain about the platforming more later, but I will give these segments one thing. They're very generous with checkpoints. At the end of the lighthouse, we arrive at the Witch's Island, which is from the original game. There's no music in this section, just the eerie sound of the wind, as Maruzuki runs through the foggy forest. Eventually we come across a tree with a strange symbol on it, and using the Hamza causes a door to appear. You will never guess where this door takes us. Entering the door, we're brought to the mansion from Ao-Oni. We unfortunately don't get to explore it, but we can pick up a game cartridge, which we can then use back in Maruzuki's dream room, letting us play an Ao-Oni themed minigame. Aside from that, there's not much else to do here, so enjoy this little cameo from Ao-Oni. We're brought back to the Witch's Island, though now there's snow falling down. We can eventually find an igloo with a pink portal inside, which is a direct reference to an igloo found in the original game Snow Worlds. Heading through the portal takes us to the Pink Sea, a very iconic area from the original game. I was honestly excited to see how Dream Diary would handle the Pink Sea, as it's one of my favorite areas from Yume Nikki. It's a pretty clear homage to Magic Hands from the Mother series, and it's also home to the Uboa Easter egg, who you might remember from earlier in this video. Thankfully, I do think they actually did the Pink Sea justice here. Just like in Yume Nikki, there's not much to do here, except admire the scenery and float across some balloons. I do think this segment goes on for maybe a bit too long, but I enjoyed the atmosphere, so I didn't mind too much. We're eventually brought to a house at the center of the island, and just like in the original, it's Panako's house. Panako has a much older appearance in this game, looking more like a young adult, rather than having an ambiguous age like in the original. I don't know how I feel about this change. On the one hand, having her be older than Maruzuki does raise some interesting questions about who exactly Panako is, but it also reminds me of the Yume Nikki manga, where it's implied that Panako/Uboa is Maruzuki's abusive mother, and I did not care for the Yume Nikki manga.
What? How can you even say that, Dad?
Didn't like it.
Speaking of Uboa, like I said earlier, Uboa sucks in this game. If you need a refresher, here's the lame-ass jump scare they turned him into. Reducing Uboa to a brief, cheap jump scare is just so stupid. Part of what makes Uboa so iconic is the strange area he teleports you to. But they don't even have that in this game! Well, okay, they do. we just don't have the effect required for it yet. I mean, it still wasn't even in the game on launch, so technically I'm just going off of how it was rather than how it is. But we'll talk more about that later. Regardless of how poorly executed Uboa is here, this does bring the docks to a close. Overall, I think it's a decent reinterpretation of a fan favorite area from the original, though it does have some issues, namely Uboa and the coin hunt. With that out of the way, we can now finish up the wilderness. Heading back to the barracks settlements, we can give the kite to one Pirori, giving us the penultimate stone slab, and giving the kalimba to the other Pirori causes him to play a melody. This melody is how we get the final slab, as if we play it at Rappy in the mural worlds, he'll spit it out amongst some blood. With these 4 slabs, we can now open up the path to the next area, though I do have a small complaint. See these symbols on the slabs? It's clear they're supposed to match with the symbols on the walls, yet they flat out don't match. The slab that's 2 sticks crossed over each other? Yeah, that's not for the wall with the X symbol. The slab with the eyeball is, and somehow, the wall with the eyeball symbol is the one we use the X slab for. I don't know if they just messed up the coding here or something, but I thought this was really stupid. Anyway, we can now head up the extremely long staircase, in a sequence taken straight out of the original game. I have no notes here, this is a pretty faithful recreation, and one done decently well. At the top of the stairs lies the Sky Garden, where we can find the umbrella effect, alongside these guys watching a UFO in the distance. Again, this is all a faithful recreation that's done well, so I have nothing to really add. In fact, this area is such a faithful recreation, they didn't even change the music. That's not an issue though, don't get me wrong. The Sky Garden track is one of my favorites from Yume Nikki. Finally, there's a small warehouse full of white flowers. In Yume Nikki, this was the way to access the ghost worlds. It was also one of my favorite rooms in the entire game. It's just so peaceful, and being juxtaposed with the horrifying ghost world is some fantastic game design. Dream Diary fucks it up. Not nearly as bad as Uboa, mind you, but it's still not very well done here. The lack of the ghost world completely messes up the slightly creepy yet calming atmosphere, and interacting with the flower immediately wakes Monotsuki up. You also can't sit in this game, unlike in Yume Nikki, so you can't really just sit and enjoy the tranquil atmosphere. Again, this isn't as bad as Uboa, but I still don't like how Dream Diary handles the flower room. This is the end of the wilderness though, which also brings us to the halfway point of the game. So far, there's a lot of good things about it. The soundtrack is excellent, and the parts of the game that are more faithful are pretty good. There's plenty of bad too though, but maybe the second half of the game will be a bit better. Only one way to find out, after this break. Next up is the sewers, which I barely have anything to say about. This area was added in the same update, which added the proper Uboa events. And you can really tell this was added in an update. There's nothing to do here, and the sewers really just serve as a way to quickly get between areas, almost serving as a second nexus. There is one new area we can access though, and that's Block World. I hate Block World. This is the most platforming-centric area of the game, and the platforming in this game is bad. Really bad. It gets a little more manageable with the umbrella effect, but guess what? I didn't have the umbrella effect before coming here. That's a complete skill issue on my part, but you literally can't complete this area without the umbrella. I didn't mention it during the dock section, since the platforming there wasn't too bad, but when you jump on a ledge, there's a short climbing animation. it's a bit too slow in my opinion, and sometimes you don't even climb up. Sometimes you'll hit a ledge, and Marotsuki just won't climb. It's great. I love this game. Oh, and you know what the best part of this whole area is? You're playing hide and seek with Mafarako, who teleports to another area every time you find her. It's a cute reference to the original game, though some of these spots are downright evil. This whole block world segment took me over half an hour to complete, just because I couldn't figure out how the hell to get to some of these spots. Combined with the janky platforming, I often had to try to do some of these ridiculously difficult jumps multiple times. Now, I have no issue with difficult platforming in games. I love the Donkey Kong Country games, and those games have some pretty damn hard levels. I do, however, have issue with the platforming being difficult and bad. I'm sorry, I really just cannot stress enough how bad the platforming feels. This is some of the most stiff platforming I have ever had the displeasure of playing, and that's really saying a lot, considering I've played a lot of FPS games with terrible platforming controls. There's also this gimmick of the toilet in the middle of the area, switching the camera angle, and while it's a decent enough gimmick, it's also barely used. You only need to switch the camera angle once or twice, and even then, I don't know if it was even necessary for one of them. I hate the block world. This is one of the worst sections in any game I have ever played, and one of the worst parts is that I really liked the block world in the original game. It had such a unique style, not present anywhere else in Yume Nikki, and I liked it a lot for that. Thankfully, this does bring me to the end of my complaints. Like in the original game, the block world here looks fantastic, and while the song here is completely changed, I actually prefer this version. There is a high-pitched ringing noise, which is a little painful to listen to for 30 minutes straight, but overall, the new song gets the mysterious yet somewhat whimsical tone of the block world down perfectly. While I hated playing this section, I did at least enjoy looking at it. Plus, the concept isn't that bad. Using Mafarako's teleportation gimmick from the original game as more of an intentional hide-and-seek is interesting. Just poorly executed. Not gonna lie, I'm starting to think poor execution might be a recurring issue in this game. Regardless, once we do find Mafarako all 6 times, we can enter the next area, the Snow World. I'm not really sure why the Snow World is here twice. Supposedly there is another igloo here, which brings you to the Pink Sea, but I couldn't find it. And that's because this is a maze. I'm not going to be too harsh on the maze, since, honestly, I didn't really mind it. It's a clear reference to the looping areas of the original game, and with some trial and error, it's not too hard to find Mafarako again. What's weird though, is that there's no real ending to this segment of the game. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but each door in Dream Diary has its own ending, be that the flower room in the Sky Garden, or Uboa in the Pink Sea. But here, in the sewers, you just find Mafarako again, and the screen fades to white. I mean, you don't even get an achievement for this one. We do, however, get the hat and scarf effects, but this is by far the most useless effect in the game. We can combine it with the umbrella to cause snow to fall, but this is only needed for maybe 3 collectibles, with only 1 necessary for progression. The sewers really just felt like padding to me, and given that they were added in updates, I'm not shocked they feel so underdeveloped. Okay, that last one was pretty quick. Next up is the school. When we first arrive here, we're outside, but the door leading inside is blocked by Manoe. When I first saw Manoe here, I was honestly really confused. She's another returning NPC, but she was originally found in the White Desert, which is not only the deepest location in the entire game, but also one of the darkest. Unlike in her original incarnation, Manoe here is sad. She's constantly crying, and any attempt to get near her is met with her yelling at Monotsuki, knocking her away. Through trial and error, I managed to figure out that we can get her to leave by using the Umbrella's rain ability, allowing us to finally enter the school. This area is basically one big fetch quest, having us go up and down the levels of the school to bring items to NPCs, so we can find 4 pieces of a torn up photo, which is of Manoe. She seems to be less pale in the photo, which makes me wonder, is she supposed to be a ghost in this game? That's not a bad reinterpretation, which actually brings me to my opinion on this whole area. I really enjoy the school and its haunted school vibe, and it's, in my opinion, the best of the new areas. It doesn't feel too out of place compared to something like the Slaughterhouse, as it has the same creepy yet calm atmosphere that much of the original game had. That's in no small part due to the music, which is probably my favorite original track in the game. Just like the area itself, the song perfectly captures the essence of the original Yume Nikki, and I think it's on par with the best songs from that game. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, we have to find 4 pieces of a photo. 3 of these are incredibly easy to get, but the 4th gave me a bit of trouble. You have to push this locker down the stairs in order to reach it, which I think is a little unintuitive, since the game gives no indication that you can do that. But at the same time, I don't really think this is a bad puzzle either. I think I'm just stupid. With the 4 fragments in hand, we need to return to the top floor and interact with Manoe. This allows us to physically put the photo back together in a pretty cool and unique puzzle, and once we do so, Manoe disappears. This lets us head outside onto the roof, where we can sleep in a bed, which teleports us to the Red School. I do not like the Red School. I'll get what I do like out of the way first. I do like this area visually, and I think the song is alright. The issues arise when we get to the puzzles. The first one requires us to jump and glide with the umbrella, heading left towards a floating island. We then have to use the valve, by the way this is found in the mall by using the Hamza in this room with the elevator, to cause a pain blob to spawn. We then have to push this blob down the stairs, so it breaks through the glass and lets us inside. The puzzles start getting worse once we get inside, because now we have to climb on top of these eyeball blocks. After using some levers to get the first block down, we then need to push them in place. This isn't too hard, even though the blocks can sometimes fail to stack on top of each other properly. No, the real issue is climbing up from the blocks. This is such a pixel-perfect jump, and it perfectly highlights the issue with the platforming. I'm not joking when I say you have to be pixel-perfect with this. It took me so many tries that I was beginning to think I was doing the puzzle wrong. But no, after looking at a guide, this is the intended solution. I don't know if maybe I'm just especially bad at the platforming in this game, or if it is actually this bad, but I found this part to be extremely annoying. Thankfully, after making this jump, we can activate a lever to make backtracking to the second floor way easier. After this, we get the lamp effects, and it's here that I realized something. This is the number world. Yeah, remember how I said that the school was an area not present in the original game?
Wait, no.
Now, it's not like this is without precedent. The number world in Yume Nikki was already theorized to represent a school, and the song used during the classroom segments in the Red School is a remake of the number world song. But honestly, I kind of would have preferred a more faithful remake. The number world is one of the creepiest areas in Yume Nikki, and that's partially because of its strange and oppressive atmosphere, mostly due to the weird-ass visuals. In this game, it's just a haunted school. In my opinion, the normal version of the school does the whole haunted school aesthetic better than the Red School, as I feel the Red School is a bit more try-hardy in its attempt to be unsettling. Regardless, I appreciate all the little references to the number world here. Not only is the song the same, but those eyeball blocks I mentioned earlier look exactly like the wheelies from the Number Worlds, and the lamp being found here, again, is a reference to where it's found in the original game. Back to the puzzles. The rest of the puzzles here are just pushing blocks, which is fine. I didn't really care for it, but at the same time, I don't have much issue with it. The real issue arises when we finish pushing the blocks, because there's a wall here that looks like it can be jumped over, but it can't. No, what you're supposed to do here is get another pain blob. Now, I didn't originally think to do this, and in my defense, Dream Diary doesn't really do puzzles like this, where you need to do something twice. Most things in Dream Diary just happen once. I'm still not really gonna fault this puzzle too much though. Once we get rid of the stuff blocking the path, we can continue onwards. This takes us to the stairway from the original game, where we can find Kyukyu-kun and Manoe. I really hate this part. Not only is this another area ending that's just a jump scare, but this is a complete butchering of the original stairway. I'll give this ending one thing. Hearing Monosuke actually cut open the zipper tile is unpleasant, though in an entirely intentional way. This bit feels like something out of Silent Hill, and given the gross and unpleasant nature of the stairway, I think this is a pretty fitting comparison. As for the actual ending though, it's bad. The jump scare is lame, and it's a waste of Manoe as a character. You know how she's been crying and sad this whole time? That's a completely made up thing for this game. In the original Yume Nikki, Manoe just kind of walks around and smiles at you. The only thing that she does is that when you interact with her, a detailed close-up of her smile appears on screen for a second. That's it. I'm not saying they needed to do this exactly, but making her instead this weird, antagonistic figure just doesn't work. And the worst part is that this fucks up the stairway. In the original game, there's nothing but you, Kyukyu-kun, and the door that leads to the face events. Now, to be fair, you can still access the face events, which is 100 times worse in this game than it is in the original. There's a lot of interpretations for what the stairway area means, but the most popular theory is that due to Kyukyu-kun's phallic appearance,
That's a peanut!
this event represents some sort of SA that Monosuke experienced in the past, likely at school. Replacing Monosuke with Manoe, who is constantly crying and also appears to be a ghost, flat out confirms the theory. Just like the ending of the Shotengai, this ruins all of the mystique that Yume Nikki had built by confirming that yes, this popular fan theory is actually canon. If the ending was handled better, I could maybe look past Dream Diary doing this. But because it's just a lame jump scare, I can't. Thankfully, we only have one more area to go through. And I think I've maybe saved the best for last. Okay, so this section's going to be a little weird, because this is the first area I visited, but the last one I completed. I'm going to be going through everything here as if I did visit it last, but since we already have a couple things from here, I'm going to skip over those. Upon entering the mall, the first thing we see is Takuro-kun, a, say it with me now, returning NPC from the original game. There's only a couple returning NPCs left, just bear with me here. We have to chase after him, but we can't keep up with him. He's just ever so slightly faster than us, and given that this hallway loops infinitely, we've got to figure out another way to catch him. This is where the escalators come into play, as if we interact with these levers, we can switch to the direction they're facing. This puzzle took me a lot of trial and error, but after making almost all of the escalators face downwards, I got him. I actually enjoyed this puzzle a lot, and despite it being slightly annoying at times, I do think it's overall one of the best puzzles in the game. Catching Tokuro-kun gives us the warehouse key, which allows us to open the locked door on the first floor. This takes us to a dark room where these mannequin creatures chase after us, but only when the lights flicker off. This section is much easier with the lamp, as it freezes the mannequins in place, but I believe this section is possible without it. I actually almost completed it without the lamp, but there was one jump that I just could not get past, so I gave up and decided to come back later. As for the mannequin section itself, it's fine. While the lamp trivializes the first parts, the second half is still a bit challenging. For once, it's not because of the bad platforming controls, but because of an actual intentional challenge. You can't jump if you're holding the lamp, so you still have to time your jumps with the lights flickering, while giving yourself enough time to pull the lamp back out. Once we make it through this section, we get a little break from the mannequins. You're supposed to go right here, but I saw that there was a ledge you can jump onto above the door, so I checked that out first. This takes us to another door with another short mannequin section, and this one flat out requires the lamp. At the end of the path, we can get the rooftop key, which I'll get back to in just a moment. Exiting this area puts us back in the previous section, which is a bit annoying, but thankfully it's only about halfway through the second part, so I don't mind too much. Returning back to the area where I went left, I decided to actually go right this time. This brings us to a couple mannequins and a bed, and despite the ominous music playing, I decided to sleep in the bed. Now, yes, this is another jump scare, but I actually like this one. Not only is it done decently well, at least by this game's standards, as it has decent build-up, but it's not just a scary face flashing on screen for a second, like Wanoe or Uboa. It also definitely helps that this isn't using another pre-existing character in a stupid way. Now, normally, we'd be done here, but there's that rooftop key that we found, and I want to show you what it does. During my first visit to the mall, I did find a locked door on the top floor of the elevator room, so I assumed the key was for that. And I was right. Using the rooftop key, we can now access the roof, where not only we can find a cat, referencing the roof in the original game, but we can find another game cartridge. Like how Oni, this can only be used in the dream world, and it lets us play a shoot-'em-up game as Witch Monotsuki from the original Yume Nikki. I liked this little reference a lot, and I wish there was more stuff like this in Dream Diary. There is supposedly an Easter egg where when you go into the dream world, you get the original game's graphics, but I never encountered it. Anyway, we can find another jellyfish here, but you forgot those existed, which will be important pretty soon. With the rooftop visited, we are now finally done with the mall, and therefore, all 6 Nexus doors. There's just one door left, the locked red door. Let's take a look inside, shall we? The final door takes us back to Monotsuki's dream room. There's nothing different here, so all we can do is step back outside. This actually lets us explore Monotsuki's apartment building a bit, though there's not much here, aside from this room with 3 glowing red Venus symbols, and this room with a rusty key. After getting the key, the Shadow Man from the Shotengai returns, chasing us through the hallway. Objects start flying towards us, which stun Monotsuki if they hit her. This chase is honestly really annoying, since the camera angle can sometimes make it hard to avoid getting stunned by the flying objects. Once we get through this, we're brought to a platforming section where we have to avoid the Shadow Man while simultaneously platforming through floating islands resembling the street from the opening. This part sucks. The camera angle, again, makes this section far harder than it should be, and every time you die, you're sent back to the beginning. This is the one platforming section in the game to have 0 checkpoints, and I died about 4 times here. This section's only saving grace is that I do like the music that plays when the Shadow Man appears. But I'm sorry, this just isn't Yume Nikki. I mentioned it all the way back in the Shotengai, but the Shadow Man is an original creation for this game, and he does not fit at all. This ending section felt like something out of Little Nightmares or Inside, but not Yume Nikki. Quick side note, I haven't played either of those games I just mentioned, so I don't know if that comparison is accurate at all, but those games are what came to mind while I was playing through this. Anyway, this segment is just way too unsubtle for Yume Nikki, as the original game would never even think of doing something like this. While I do consider Yume Nikki to be a horror game, it's very abstract with its horror. The closest Yume Nikki gets to being traditionally scary is probably during the Uboa and Face events, but given that they're unexplained, why they're disturbing is up to the player's interpretation. The Shadow Man though, he's just a generic horror game monster. He doesn't even look like he's part of this game's universe, which I suppose maybe was the point, but he isn't even successfully scary. I am not intimidated by this generic shadow monster that had almost no build-up and only one prior appearance. If he was a persistent threat throughout the game, like say Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, my tone would be a lot different here, as the segment would feel way less out of place. But as it stands, this just feels like a reuse of assets. It feels like they couldn't be bothered, or more likely, didn't have the time to make a more interesting final encounter, so they just reused the Shadow Man from the Shotengai. Then there's the aforementioned issue of the platforming controls being bad, and coupled with the bad camera angle. This section just isn't fun. It only gets worse though, as the final jump is flat out stupid. You're supposed to jump off this ledge so you can float towards the Nexus, but I genuinely don't know how you're supposed to figure this out, aside from trial and error, since you literally can't see the Nexus until after you start floating. I'm not saying there needed to be a big red arrow pointing at where to go, I just think there should have been some sort of indication that jumping off this ledge wouldn't kill you. Once you make it back to the Nexus, the doors start disappearing one by one, leaving only the door leading back to Monotsuki's room. Monotsuki opens the door, scared, before sitting down on the floor. When she gets back up, it's now morning. She goes over to her balcony, staring down at the ground, but doesn't jump. Instead, she goes back to her door and opens it, revealing a white void. As she walks through, the screen fades to white, and Yume Nikki Dream Diary comes to a close.
That's it? That's the
Ending?
That was just a bunch of
Bad platforming.
What a rip!
Kikiyama.
Betrayed us!
I don't know how to feel about this ending. I'll start with what I do like about it, starting with its more, I guess, optimistic approach. If we choose to believe that Yume Nikki's ending is indeed Monotsuki taking her own life, unable to cope with her isolation and her possible trauma, then I guess this ending is instead her coping, finally able to once again go outside. However, my belief is that Yume Nikki's ending is more metaphorical than literal, and that it still takes place within the dream world. That's why the jellyfish reappear, in order to signal that it's still not real, and that's also why everything seems so sudden. I do think that Dream Diary's ending is a fine interpretation, especially since, going off the opening, it might be suggesting that Dream Diary is a sequel, but I don't know. I just kinda don't like this ending. I recognize that this is entirely down to personal preference, as while I prefer Yume Nikki's ending being a more metaphorical death leading to rebirth, the rebirth in question being Monotsuki going outside, I do understand why some people would prefer a more literal interpretation. However, I think this is emblematic of Dream Diary's tendency to over-explain Yume Nikki's possible story, as it refuses to let the player come to any conclusions on their own, instead of a vague ending which could represent countless possibilities, entirely dependent on what the player thinks the game means. Dream Diary's ending is unequivocally, Monotsuki copes with her past trauma and goes outside. Again, it's a fine interpretation. I just don't like how spoon-fed it is to the player. There's no room for interpretation here, and interpretation is why I like Yume Nikki so much. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and I think that's exactly what a good piece of art should be. But Dream Diary isn't art. It's a product, a video game. And I'm not a fan of that. Now, don't get me wrong, this cutscene is probably the best part of the ending. The platforming section beforehand was straight up bad. This cutscene is just disappointing. And yet, I think it's a fitting end for this game. Dream Diary has some good aspects, like its atmosphere and soundtrack, and it has some bad aspects. But most of this game is just disappointing. However, we're not done yet. I'm sure you see how much longer is left in the video, so we still have to go find a secret ending. Right after this break. Okay, I'm just gonna be upfront. I looked up how to get the secret ending. I'm sure you've already guessed by now, but we need to find the jellyfish to get the secret ending. This is what I assumed the jellyfish were for when I first found one, but I wanted to make sure before I spent a bunch of time looking for them. I'm going to go over the locations of these jellyfish relatively quick, since they aren't really very interesting, though there's a couple other little secrets I want to go over as well. The first jellyfish I want to go over is the Distraxx jellyfish, which I actually found before getting the normal ending. This one is just to the left of the starting area, just like the one in the Shotengai, though you do need the umbrella to get it. Next is the wilderness jellyfish, which is hidden inside one of the houses in the barrack settlements. Again, super easy to find, but before we leave, I want to go over another secret in the wilderness. In the starting area, there's this hidden area towards the left. This area is a reference to the Ningen party from the original game, and while I do appreciate the reference, I still think it's a bit underwhelming. In Yume Nikki, the Ningen party represents the isolation that Monotsuki experiences, and how she is always just out of reach of happiness, never able to experience it for herself. Here though, it's just a little reference. It's perfectly fine since I don't think it's meant to be anything more than a reference, but I'm still being reminded of a better game here. Anyway, there's also a sign with the Hamza symbol on it, and if we use the Hamza, we're allowed access to the infinite wilderness. This isn't a very interesting area, as all we can find is the onsen where Onsen-san would be if he wasn't dead, and some more references to the original game's wilderness. There is one interesting thing here though, that being this box. If you've played Yume Nikki, you should already know what this is. Before I show it though, I have to give a quick flashing lights warning. Skip to this timestamp if you need it. Okay, here's the Aztec Rave Monkey. For those of you who haven't played the original game, this is a returning event from Yume Nikki. This is a pretty faithful recreation. In fact, I think it might be exactly the same as it was originally. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm glad this was unchanged. I just think it's funny that, of all things, this is the one piece of the original game that wasn't changed at all. The next jellyfish is in the school, and it's another easy one. In my first visit to the school, I found a toilet key in the red school area, which we can then use to unlock the toilet on the third floor of the regular school. where the jellyfish resides. Okay, now it's time for the last jellyfish. This one is in the sewers, and we have to use the hat and scarf effects combined with the umbrella, which freezes the water. This lets us enter a room with a bunch of alley demons that's impossible to get through. Now, I don't mean that hyperbole, I mean it's literally impossible. So, how are we supposed to get past them? Well, we gotta go back to Uboa. Using the lamp effect during the Uboa event lets us interact with Panako's desk, which takes us to a more accurate recreation of the Uboa events. Despite this though, I still don't really like it. We have to chase after Uboa so we can get the Mask of Fear effect, which is how we get the sewer jellyfish, which is fine, but it still doesn't feel right for Uboa. Part of the reason why Uboa is so memorable is because he traps you, being the only non-Tori Ningen NPC to do this. In addition, the area he traps you in is an infinite hallway with weird visuals. And this isn't that. I'm not a huge fan of the visuals in this area, as while the background monster is a bit more creepy looking, I actually prefer its more abstract design from the original. The weirdness of Uboa's trap in the original really adds to its unnerving feeling, but here it's a bit more generic. It's still a whole lot better than a cheap, shitty jump scare, but it's still not great. Both of these versions of Uboa are a misunderstanding of what makes this character so iconic, as they reduce him to just another monster. I'll give Dream Diary this: at least the second version of Uboa fits decently well within the context of Dream Diary. Speaking of characters being reduced to just another monster, there's one more area I want to talk about before we move on to the secret ending. Remember Manoe from the school? Well, if you've played Yume Nikki, you know that there's another NPC related to her, Monoko. Surely, then, Monoko has to be in Dream Diary, right? If we head back to the slaughterhouse and open the door that would normally take us to the dense woods, we'll instead be taken to this room. This is a room filled with beds, where we can eventually find Monoko. What's strange, though, is this area is referencing a room in the Number Worlds. Why this is attached to the Shotengai, which I believe to be an analog for the Eyeball World, I have no idea. But regardless, Monoko is here, and after chasing, then cornering her, she transforms into a multi-limbed monster who chases after Monotsuki. Now, why am I bringing this entirely optional area up? That's because just like Uboa, I think this is a complete misuse of a character. In the original, Monoko isn't an antagonist like this. She's a random, kind of funny NPC. In order to deform her like this, you have to equip the stoplight effect, which then causes her to bounce around like a DVD logo, as this strange song plays. It's honestly a pretty silly moment, and although it does tie into a popular fan theory that Monotsuki experienced a car accident, it's still kind of just silly. Here in Dream Diary though, Monoko is just another monster, like Uboa, and like Monoe. I understand why these three NPCs had to be changed, as Dream Diary is trying to be much more of a traditional horror game, and I'm not against these characters being used like this. I just don't think this is the way to do it. I think these characters should have either been remade more traditionally, or the developers should have fully leaned into the horror and made them threats that follow you throughout the game. Just as an example, they could have done what the Yume Nikki manga did and make Uboa the main antagonist. I still don't really like that approach, but that's at least something. Regardless, while I don't think Monoko was handled well, she was at least handled better than Monoe and Uboa. Gameplay-wise, I don't mind Monoko's room that much. I do wish there was a reason to go to it, aside from an achievement, but it's fine. The song, at least, is really good, and it might even be my favorite track from the entire game. It sounds like something straight out of Silent Hill, and I mean that as an utmost compliment. Despite how great the song is, and despite the gameplay being decent, I just can't look past an iconic character being used in such a poor way. Like Uboa before, I think the misuse of Monoko is emblematic of Dream Diary's issues. It's trying to be Yume Nikki, while also trying to be a more traditional horror game. But it's not succeeding at being either. Okay, let's move on before I keep repeating myself. Now that we have all 6 jellyfish, we can get the secret ending. To activate it, all we have to do is head back to the ending area and interact with the red Venus symbols in that one room, and then head to the left before the final platforming segments, interacting with the Venus symbols once again. And this causes Marotsuki to get beamed up by a spaceship, which is the final returning area from the original game. Of course, given that this is the spaceship from the original game, Sekon Masada Sensei is also here. He's playing the piano we can hear in this area, and interacting with him presents us with one final flute puzzle. It's not too hard, though I did have to look up how to complete it, because for some reason you actually have to interact with him twice. But once the melody is played, it's done. Marotsuki sleeps in the spaceship's bed, giving us Dream Diary's secret ending. It's honestly very underwhelming, as given the amount of work one has to put in to get this ending, I kind of expected more. Finding all 6 jellyfish requires the player to see pretty much everything the game has to offer, and while that isn't a lot, it also kind of is. It took me about 7 hours to get Dream Diary's secret ending, over the course of 3 days. While it did take me twice as long to see everything in Yume Nikki, that game is also a lot less direct in its approach. Not to mention the padding throughout Dream Diary, like in the sewers. And Dream Diary just feels a lot more underwhelming content-wise. So I guess the secret, or true, ending being underwhelming is fitting. Now, to be fair, I don't necessarily think this is a bad ending. I think this ending is trying to imply that Marotsuki has found peace living in her dream world, serving as more of a companion to the first ending, rather than a replacement. However, I think this could have been a bit more clear. I know, I was just complaining earlier about how Dream Diary over-explains itself, but this random pivot into being vague, just like the original Yume Nikki, feels less like an intentional part of the ending, and more like a response at fan backlash. From what I've seen, the public opinion on Dream Diary is pretty similar to my own, being that the game misunderstands what makes Yume Nikki so great by over-explaining its story and replacing the mystique with cheap jump scares and more traditional horror elements. The default ending is a great example of this, while the secret ending is a complete 180 in the other direction. I actually had to think about what it means, which is great, but it's also the only time this game has made me do that. Yume Nikki, on the other hand, I spent days, maybe even weeks trying to figure it out. Yume Nikki is just vague enough that you can come to some sort of conclusion about what it all means just by playing for long enough. Dream Diary spoon-feeds everything to you, until the secret ending, where it just fades to white and expects you to figure it out on your own. Now, to be fair, I am being maybe a bit too harsh here. I do think this ending is fine. In fact, I prefer it over the default ending. I just think it could have been better. As it stands, it feels like it was either an excuse to put Sekon Masada Sensei in the game, or it was originally supposed to be more. After all, in the original, the spaceship does take you to Mars, which isn't present anywhere here. Regardless of why this ending exists, I found it disappointing. But given that Dream Diary is, overall, a disappointing remake, it's a quite fitting ending, don't you think? I really wanted to like Dream Diary. I've been hearing that Dream Diary is mediocre ever since I first heard about it a couple years ago, but I still wanted to give it a chance. I really did go into this game with an open mind, and I hate how negative I've been towards it. There's a lot going for this game, as I truly do think the concept of turning Yume Nikki into a more traditional horror/adventure game is great, though it's one that needs to be executed near flawlessly in order to work. You can't just turn it into a puzzle platformer and call it a day. You need to closely examine Yume Nikki in order to figure out what exactly makes it tick. This is what the best Yume Nikki fan games do, and while they don't feel quite the same as Yume Nikki, they're not trying to be the same. Let's look at Yume Tuki and Dot Flow for some quick examples. These games are on the complete opposite ends of the spectrum, as Yume Tuki expands upon the relaxing aspects of Yume Nikki, and Dot Flow expands upon the spookier aspects of Yume Nikki. While they both play almost identically to Yume Nikki, they still have their own unique identities, and both are great games in their own rights. Dream Diary, however, has much more of an identity crisis. Yes, it's not a fan game, as it is a quote-unquote official remake of Yume Nikki, but it honestly still feels like it's trying to be a fan game. You can definitely tell that the developers are fans of the original, given how much fan service there is, but it seems like they just couldn't make the game quite how they wanted to. I'm inclined to blame this on Dream Diary's strange direction, as it can never decide if it wants to be a faithful Yume Nikki remake or something entirely new. In my opinion, they should have gone in one of two directions. Either lead into this being Yume Nikki and make a fully faithful 3D remake, or lean into the horror and make this a Yume Nikki themed survival horror game. You can do a lot of cool horror stuff with Yume Nikki's themes of isolation and trauma, and given that Dream Diary's atmosphere is one of its best aspects, I do think an atmospheric horror game taking equal inspiration from Silent Hill and Yume Nikki could work. Would that just be a worse version of Dot Flow? Maybe. But it would have been something. In its current form, I can only call Dream Diary a confusing mess, one with a horrendous identity crisis, and one that seemingly doesn't understand its source material at all. Ignoring the misuse of some important characters for now, God knows I've gone over that enough already, I think Dream Diary's biggest flaw is that you never really feel isolated. I know it's a bit late in the video to be bringing up new problems, but this is something that I've only realized in the weeks since playing the game and writing most of this script. In Dream Diary, there's almost always something happening, whether that be the chase sequences, avoiding enemies like in the Shotengai, or doing some puzzle platforming in the docks or block world. There's always something going on. This is fine in the context of Dream Diary, as it is an adventure game at its core, but this isn't what Yume Nikki is about at all. Remember all the way back at the start of the video, when I described Yume Nikki as an interactive painting? I described it like that because so much of the game is built on just atmosphere, nothing else. Yes, you have a goal, but as a reminder, the real goal of Yume Nikki is just to see what the game has to offer. Every world in this game could be somebody's favorites, and when you find that one area that you just absolutely love, the one that you wish you could spend time in within your own dreams, that's when Yume Nikki really shines. Be that the docks, Sky Garden, Mars, or the mall roof, there's plenty of relaxing areas in the game, with nothing to really do. Dream Diary doesn't really have any. Now, to be fair, Dream Diary does kind of have what I was just talking about. After all, most of those areas are in Dream Diary, but they're just not the same. Even the areas with nothing going on, like the mall rooftop or the Sky Garden, just don't feel the same. The vibes are different, and it's not just because of how the areas themselves are different, it's because of how the game is as a whole. Maybe it's just me, but I never felt like I could just sit down and enjoy these areas. Maybe it's because of the lack of a sit button, maybe it's because I just wasn't in the right mindset, or maybe it's something else. Whatever it is, the game doesn't really feel like it's slowing down in these areas, because it isn't. You only have one real chance to just sit and enjoy the atmosphere, and that's in the Pink Sea. The game forces you to slow down here, given how long the balloons take to float across the ocean, and it's great. I really wish Dream Diary had more moments like this, as the Pink Sea is by far the highlight of the game, but the fact that there's only one area, one single area, out of the roughly 20 in the game, that came remotely close to feeling like Yume Nikki, is bad. Yes, there's other areas that are relaxing, like the aforementioned docks and Sky Garden, as well as areas like the school and the first room of the Shotengai. But I don't know, they just feel different to me. It's really hard to explain in words, as this is entirely going off of vibes. This brings me to my next issue, which is the gameplay. As much as I think the concept is good, this is just not the right execution. I've complained enough about the bad platforming controls, so let's look at another issue. The pacing. Only having 6 main areas to explore is fine, but they're so linear. Yume Nikki is all about exploration, and there's just nothing to explore here. No deep hidden areas, only found by traveling through several other locations. No ways to travel back and forth between deeper locations. And worst of all, only a handful of effects, with only 3 being useful outside of 1 or 2 puzzles. The effects and events are one of the main reasons for exploration in Yume Nikki, and Dream Diary just barely has any. None of them are really hidden either, and the effects chosen are honestly kind of strange. Take a look at this. They added the hat and scarf, but not the bicycle, arguably the most iconic effect from the original outside of the knife and maybe the umbrella. I'll admit that this is a bit of a nitpick, but what isn't a nitpick is how linear this game's worlds feel. Taking the original's interconnected world and reducing it into what boils down to 6 levels feels wrong. Yes, there is some interconnection, but it never goes deeper beyond the Nexus doors. And that's because you can't return to the Nexus. Remember how I said the sewers felt like padding? That's because they're probably just meant for accessing the block world and a couple of the other Nexus worlds. Yes, the sewers usually puts you a bit further in the other paths, like putting you in the barrack settlements instead of the wilderness, but still, this is pretty much the only interconnection between areas. There is also, of course, the issue of how misused a lot of the content from the original game is, which also ties into the issue of how the game over-explains its plots. Now, when I say over-explain, I'm not saying Dream Diary just straight up says, hey, QQ-kun is an allegory for SA. It's still technically using subtext. It's just way less subtle. I've already talked about how I think it's wonderful that Yume Nikki can be interpreted in so many different ways. So taking that player freedom away by using only the most popular fan interpretations and all but confirming them isn't great. Then there's the misuse of characters like Shitai-san and Manoe. Manoe I'll skip over since I kind of already went over all my thoughts on her, but I'm sorry, I still don't understand what the fuck they were trying to say with Shitai-san. Just going off of how this game is with everything else, I assume they're trying to say Shitai-san is Monotsuki's dead dad or something, who died in a car accident. But then why frame it like Monotsuki killed him? Shitai-san still likely represents survivor's guilt. So why do we only see him after Monotsuki stabs Ansun-san? The way the Shotengai ending is framed, It's seemingly implying that Monotsuki is some secretly evil killer, but that doesn't make sense. There's literally nothing else in the game to support this, as the door endings don't really tie into each other. Maybe they were trying to go for each one being a different part of Monotsuki's life or something, but I don't know. If you're going to try to over-explain the plot of Yume Nikki like this, don't half-ass it. Either do what the ending did and just fully over-explain it, or don't over-explain it at all. I would prefer both of those options instead of remaining vague to preserve the spirit of the original or something. I really wanted to like this game. I do think that at its core, Dream Diary isn't a bad game. It's a fine adventure game, but everything I've said so far has been in the context of it being a Yume Nikki remake. And as a remake, both pandering to old fans, like myself, while also trying to bring in new fans, it just doesn't work. But it could've. The gameplay is mostly fine. Yes, I had a couple small complaints about a few of the puzzles, but that's just because I'm stupid and bad at puzzle games. If I was smarter, I probably wouldn't have complained about them, and honestly, I don't think they're really a huge issue anyway. I do generally like that the game doesn't handhold you with its puzzles, though the solutions are still so obvious that even an idiot like me could solve them almost immediately. Aside from the exploration feeling off, the only real complaint I can come up with, at least gameplay-wise, is that the platforming controls are bad. Everything else here is fine, and again, there are some good aspects of this game. The music and atmosphere are incredible. The graphics, while kind of bad, are still a bit charming. Some of the new content fits in nicely, and I do think the developers had a real passion for the original game, which you can feel while playing. For example, they didn't need to include the witch minigame, or the supposed Easter egg where the game turns into the original Yume Nikki, but they did, and that feels like something born out of love, rather than born out of a mandate. But you know what does feel like it was born out of a mandate? Uboa, Manoe, the entirety of Block World. These parts of the game, the parts I've been more critical about, don't feel like they were born out of a genuine want to include them. They feel like they were included just because it's Yume Nikki, we gotta have this. And I think that's abundantly clear through how they were portrayed. I'm not going to sit here and theorize that Dream Diary was sabotaged by the publishers or something. I really don't think that the obscure, unpopular remake of a relatively obscure 20-year-old RPG Maker game was made bad on purpose because of the evil publisher or something. I think the developers just didn't know what they were doing. Maybe they didn't have enough time, maybe they didn't have enough experience, or maybe they just took the game in a bad direction. I don't know. All I know is that this game is highly flawed, at least from the perspective of being a Yume Nikki remake. I can look past most of its issues if I ignore that it's Yume Nikki, but I shouldn't have to do that. It's called Yume Nikki Dream Diary. I shouldn't have to pretend it's not Yume Nikki in order to enjoy it more. But overall, Dream Diary is fine. If you can pretend it's just another indie horror/adventure game with some vague lore and bad controls, it's just kinda mid. Not something I would pay $20 for, but a decent experience nonetheless. However, in the context of this being a Yume Nikki remake, it's bad, really bad. The characters are used in ways that don't make sense, the gameplay goes against what made the original so great, and while the atmosphere is incredible, the game never gives you time to enjoy it. I can't recommend playing this game unless you're a huge fan of the original, like myself, but I would just recommend playing some fan games over this. Not only are those free, but they don't have strange identity crises like Dream Diary has. I said it at the start of this video, but I think the best way I can describe Dream Diary is like this. It's not a bad game, just a bad remake. And with that, that's all I have to say about Dream Diary. This video's gone on for much longer than I thought it would, but if you couldn't tell by now, I'm very passionate about Yume Nikki. It's one of my favorite games after all, so understandably, I had a lot to say about why Dream Diary just doesn't work. I hope you all enjoyed this in-depth look at Yume Nikki Dream Diary, despite how harsh I've been towards it. I truly believe it's not a bad game, and if you want to play it, by all means, go for it. Don't let my criticism towards the game stop you from playing it, especially if you think you'll enjoy it. After all, I did get some enjoyment out of it, though for most of my playthrough, I did wish I was playing the original game, or Yume Nikki. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there, and good night.